Welcome back. You're watching Today. Now, the energy crisis is having a devastating impact on big business and the ordinary South African. We are in for another 2 years of rolling blackouts at the very least. And while there's been many debates of some affordable energy options, just what will it take to fix the energy crisis? Is government even doing enough? Here to expand on some of those questions and more is Jon Kornik, who's the CEO of Plentify. He has led energy businesses in Africa, where he helped fund some of the largest wind and solar farms, as well as developing technology products to expand energy access. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, Jon. And maybe let's start with that very question. Are there actually affordable alternatives of energy for the average South African, given the current crisis that we're in at the moment?
Hi, good afternoon. It's great to be on your show. Afternoon to your listeners as well. That's an excellent question, and I think one that is occupying the minds of most South Africans right now. I'd like to kind of frame this conversation that it's actually not just about cheaper sources of energy. If we are to address the energy crisis, be it in our homes, in our cities, or across the country more broadly, we actually need 3 ingredients, with generation just being one of them. The other 2 are storage and demand flexibility. And the initiatives that we can take as individuals in our homes, but also as a society, to implement these technologies to ultimately lead to a clean, reliable, and affordable electricity system.
Why is it so difficult, if we broaden it to make it as on a government level, Jon? Why has it been so difficult to implement those 3, what many would say sound like very simple ingredients to create the perfect energy mix and resolve the crisis?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I'm not a political analyst, and I think there's a lot of political reasons as to why we haven't taken the action which we needed to take decades ago, particularly on the generation front. But load shedding actually presents us with a really unique and powerful opportunity to leapfrog to a modern and decarbonized grid. I mean, take as an example the government lifting the cap on generation. You don't need a license for any size generation project now. 10 years ago, that would have been politically unthinkable because of the consequences it can have elsewhere in the energy chain. But load shedding crisis has forced the hand of regulators to make decisions like this. And so we're in this really unique moment in time where we can harness the potential of this crisis to make changes for the better, for the long-term sustainability of our country.
What about financing and the sources of funding or resources that we would need to create this alternative form of energy generation in the country? Do you find that we have a model that could potentially work when it comes to attracting that necessary investment?
Yeah, I mean, I think South Africa has actually got a really rich track record here in developing and implementing world-class financing mechanisms to deploy clean energy. Take the Renewable Energy Public Procurement Program. That was hailed when it launched as one of the leading programs in the world and caused South Africa to actually be the fastest growing clean energy market in the world. It's been so successful, in fact, that it's drawn in all this interest, all this international capital into the clean energy space in South Africa. And now that regulations allow for commercial players to install their own power plants for self-generation, all that money is flowing there where there aren't as many regulatory constraints, which is actually a really great thing. So if I look forward, I think that the key to unlocking finance for clean energy is less about government funding. It's more about private sector funding, facilitated by the right regulations to provide transparency, longevity, and certainty to those investors. Those are the 3 things that they want when they deploy their money into South Africa. And there's lots of case examples of how this can work in financing rooftop solar in your home, to rooftop solar and storage in businesses, to even utility scale projects on the grid.
Please share an example or 2 that you have seen in your experience that has actually worked out and has been found to be a sustainable a way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think probably the best place to look would be at other markets that have gone a little bit further down this clean energy journey than South Africa has. I mean, for example, if you look at the US, they have a really rich, vibrant rooftop solar sector Sure, that they've got their problems and they've had their own teething pains, but ultimately what they've done there is they've introduced incentives at the state level, requiring those states to procure a certain amount of clean energy or have a certain amount of clean energy in their energy mixes. Those are regulatory targets that they have to meet. And as a result, they introduce incentives for people to install rooftop solar. And as a result, the private sector comes around and businesses like Solar City and SunPower and many others rise up to fill this gap. They work with the banks and the third-party financiers to raise the capital. They build the deployment teams to get these solar panels out there. They run the customer acquisition campaigns to convince homeowners to install this technology, and they provide operations and maintenance on an ongoing basis. Similar movements are happening in the South African sector as well, and there are many smaller companies like Home Energy and Wetility and Versify that are doing a really great job in mainstreaming the rooftop PV market in South Africa. In addition, I mean, it's a tough one though, because not everyone's going to get access to that finance. It's generally going to be the people who have better credit records and are therefore on the wealthier end of the spectrum. They're going to be able to afford these solutions. And so we need to look for more affordable solutions that can bring everyone along on this journey, because ultimately it's going to save the grid, but it's also going to save people a hell of a lot of money in their homes, and it's going to improve their quality of life through better reliability.
Yeah, and that speaks to the just energy transition, the global conversation that's currently happening in terms of not leaving anyone behind when we find these cleaner sources of energy. And I'm wondering, as you talk, Jon, all of these solutions and examples that you've just given to us, would the declaration of a national state of disaster on energy in South Africa perhaps put some speed on the implementation of some of the examples as you've identified? It's a debate that has got people on polar ends of this discussion. And I just want to know your thoughts in terms of it actually working.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I wish I had a firm perspective on this, but I don't. My view is less about the initiatives that the national governments can take. I think that the power to solve this crisis sits much more firmly in the hands of our municipalities. They're much closer to actual implementation of these initiatives. They're the ones that, no matter what national government decides, they've got to actualize this into a set of plans and regulations to implement at the municipal level. And a lot of the frameworks already exist for them to do that. And cities like City of Cape Town, City of Joburg, they've both announced plans to mitigate several stages of load shedding. But what about all the other municipalities in the country? What are their plans? What capacity building, what support is national government offering them to develop similarly ambitious plans to address this crisis?
In the meantime, we are set to have load shedding, or blackouts as it's now being called, for a while. So what tips would you have for an average household to save the little bit of energy that they do have when they do have it, Jon?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it depends what your goals are. If your goal is energy security, you need to think about, what does energy security mean for you? Does it mean keeping your Wi-Fi router on during load shedding so you can continue to work from home? Does it mean being able to power your fridge so that your food doesn't go bad, or have enough power to supply your business, or supplying the entire property? And there's different levels that you can invest in there, all the way from a few hundred rand for a little UPS to back up a particular low power appliance, all the way up to hundreds of thousands of rand for a full solar and storage system. What I would encourage all South Africans to do, though, is not just think about generation, but also think about demand flexibility in particular. Because all the solar coming online is an awesome thing for the country. We really need this generation. The problem is that solar, it shines in the middle of the day. And we need most of our electricity in the peak periods, in the mornings and the evenings, when solar is either not producing at all, or it's producing very little. And so what we all need to do is shift when we use our electricity from those peak periods towards the middle of the day, so it can be better served by solar. That'll help us as individuals meet our own energy needs, but it'll also help balance the system more broadly. And the great news is there are technologies out there you can install in your home, it'll run in the background, it'll do this for you, and it'll save you hundreds of rands a month with your electricity bill.
And then just a final thought, do you think that if there is a keen implementation of some of the initiatives that you've just spoken of at a household level, but as you say, at a municipal or provincial level in the different provinces in the country, we would be able to see some form of alleviation of the blackouts, perhaps in the next 12 to 18 months. Is that a realistic view? Because that is a time frame that has been put forward by some in the energy space, should these implementations actually happen?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think 12 to 18 months is ambitious. If everything fell into place, maybe we could hit that 18-month timeline. But let me give you a concrete example of something that cities are contemplating and some are already doing. So geysers, as an example. These are the most power-hungry appliance in your home, and they draw most of their energy during those peak periods. You can install a little device in your geyser that'll change when it draws its energy towards times where we're less congested on the grid, and that'll save you hundreds of rands a month of your electricity bill. And very importantly, if 10% of households install these devices, we'll eliminate one entire stage of load shedding. Can we do that in 12 to 18 months? It seems unlikely to manufacture all those devices and get it deployed into hundreds of thousands of homes in that time, but probably within 18 to 24 months, you can talk about alleviating 1 to 2 stages of load shedding just with demand flexibility. Add on top of that all the other plans on generation and storage, and you've got a real pathway to the end of the energy crisis.
Let's just hope the relevant stakeholders were listening to our conversation this afternoon, Jon, and they have been encouraged to act with speed in terms of alleviating the crippling blackouts that we have been experiencing over the last few months. That is Jon Kornik, who's the CEO of Plentify, joining us to speak about affordable energy solutions that are out there, technology being at the center of those, and to say it's not impossible to have the different sources to help us with the energy crisis.